The first is the sit to stand, or squat pattern. This is the movement you use every time you get up from a chair, rise from the toilet, or stand up after sitting. The second is the hip hinge. This teaches you to use your hips effectively when bending forward or picking something up from the floor. And the third is controlled rotation combined with balance. Because real life isn't lived facing straight ahead, we turn, reach, change direction, step around objects, and shift our weight constantly. These aren't magic exercises, and they won't replace every form of physical activity, but they target some of the fundamental abilities that make everyday movement easier and more confident. The goal isn't to become a gymnast or touch your toes farther than anyone else. The goal is much more practical. It's being able to stand up from your chair with confidence, bend down with better control, turn comfortably, and keep moving through your day without feeling like every movement has become a challenge. So let's take a closer look at these three movements and how you can make them part of a simple mobility routine you can actually stick with. Before we get into the three movements, there's an important mistake we need to clear up. Mobility is not the same thing as stretching. Flexibility is basically how much range of motion you can access. Mobility is your ability to control and use that range of motion during movement. And then there is strength, your ability to produce force. Balance, your ability to maintain control of your body while you're standing or moving. And coordination, your ability to make all of these things work together smoothly. You need all of them. Imagine a 6-2-year-old who can sit on the floor and touch their toes without much difficulty. On paper, they might seem very flexible, but then they get up from a low sofa and struggle. They step over a small object on the floor and feel unstable. They turn quickly to look behind them and have to grab the counter for support. That's a perfect example of why flexibility alone isn't enough. Being able to stretch farther doesn't automatically mean you'll move better in real life. Your body needs practice using strength, balance, coordination, and controlled movement together. And there's another problem that often gets overlooked: too much complexity. You can find mobility routines with 10, 15, or even 20 different exercises. There's nothing inherently wrong with those exercises. Many of them can be useful, but here's the question that matters more. Will you actually do them consistently? Because a perfect 30-minute routine that you do once every 2 weeks is probably less useful than a simple routine you can realistically return to again and again. Maybe you wake up one morning and think, I'll do my mobility routine later. Then the day gets busy. You have breakfast, errands, work around the house, appointments, family responsibilities, and suddenly it's evening. The routine never happened. That's why I want this approach to be different. We're not trying to give you more exercises to remember. We're trying to give you a few fundamental movements that are simple enough to become part of your normal life. Because the best mobility routine isn't necessarily the longest or most impressive one. It's the one you can actually keep doing. There's also something else worth considering as we get older. Many of us spend more time sitting than we realize. We sit at the kitchen table. We sit in the car. We sit watching television. We sit at a computer or on the phone. And when the body spends long periods in the same position with very little movement, it can start to feel less comfortable and less prepared for movement. That doesn't mean aging automatically makes you stiff.
You don't need
or
to
incapable.
starve.
It means your body benefits from regular opportunities to move. And this matters because mobility isn't just about exercise. It's about independence. It's being able to get dressed without struggling to reach your feet. It's getting out of the car without needing several attempts. It's climbing the stairs with confidence. It's bending down to pick something up. It's walking around your home without constantly worrying about where your feet are going. These everyday abilities can be easy to take for granted when they're working well. But when movement gradually becomes more difficult, you may start avoiding certain activities. You take the elevator instead of the stairs. You stop reaching for things on lower shelves. You avoid uneven ground. You become more cautious about movements you once did automatically. And that can create a frustrating cycle of doing less because movement feels harder, and then feeling less capable because you're moving less. But this isn't a reason to become afraid of aging. It's a reason to stay prepared for it. The goal is not to fight your age. The goal is to give your body regular practice with the movements you want to keep doing. And that's exactly where our 3-move approach comes in. We're going to focus on movements that connect directly to real-life standing, bending, turning, shifting your weight, and maintaining control. Simple movements, practical movements, and most importantly, movements you can continue practicing consistently. Now let's get into the 3 movements. And remember, the goal here isn't to rush through them or prove how flexible or strong you are. The goal is to practice controlled, useful movement. If you're doing these at home, choose a clear area, wear supportive footwear if needed, and keep a sturdy chair, countertop, or wall nearby for support. If a movement causes sharp, severe, or unusual pain, stop and get appropriate professional guidance rather than trying to push through it. Let's start with movement number 1. Move Hashon sit to stand. Controlled squat. This may look almost too simple, but don't underestimate it. Think about how many times you use this movement throughout the day. You stand up from a dining chair. You get out of your favorite sofa. You rise from the toilet. You get out of the car. You stand up after tying your shoes. And every one of those movements requires your hips, knees, ankles, and muscles to work together. So here's how to practice it. Start with a sturdy chair that won't slide or roll. Sit near the front edge, with your feet approximately hip-width apart. Place your feet firmly on the floor. Keep your chest controlled and avoid simply collapsing forward. Now, lean forward just enough to bring your body into a good position to stand. Press through your feet and slowly rise to standing. Pose for a moment. Then, instead of dropping back into the chair, slowly lower yourself toward it. That lowering phase is important. You're not just practicing standing up. You're practicing controlling your body on the way down. Once you're seated, repeat. And don't worry if you need to use your hands. You can place your hands on the chair or your thighs for assistance. That's not failure. That's simply your starting point. As you become stronger and more confident, you may gradually rely less on your hands. A few coaching points can make a big difference. Move slowly. Keep your knees comfortably tracking in line with your feet. Don't allow your knees to collapse inward. And don't hold your breath. Breathe naturally throughout the movement. If you're a beginner, start with a higher, firmer chair and perform just a few repetitions. You don't need to exhaust yourself. You are practicing quality movement. As this becomes easier, you can make the exercise more challenging by using a slightly lower chair or slowing down the descent. Eventually, if it feels safe and appropriate for you, you may be able to perform controlled repetitions without using your hands. And here's the reason I like this movement so much for everyday mobility. Every time you stand up from a chair, you're practicing this pattern. You're not training for an exercise test. You're practicing something you actually need in real life. Move twee hip hinge. The second movement is the hip hinge. This one is extremely useful because bending is something we do constantly. You bend down to pick up laundry. You reach toward a low shelf. You lift groceries. You work in the garden. You pick something up from the floor. The goal of the hip hinge is to teach your body to use the hips effectively when you bend, rather than simply folding forward through your spine. Start standing with your feet in a comfortable position. Keep a slight bend in your knees. Now imagine there's a wall behind you. Your job is to gently push your hips backward toward that wall. As your hips move backward, your upper body naturally leans forward. Keep your spine in a comfortable, neutral position, rather than rounding excessively. Then press through your feet and bring your hips forward to return to standing. Here's a simple cue to remember. Imagine you're trying to close a car door with your hips. You wouldn't normally bend all the way forward and push the door shut with your back. You'd move your hips backward. That's the basic idea. And don't worry about going very deep. A small, controlled hip hinge is perfectly fine when you're learning. In fact, trying to reach the floor immediately can make the movement harder to control. If you're new to this, practice facing a wall. Stand far enough away that you can push your hips backward without immediately touching it. You can also practice beside a sturdy countertop if you need extra support. As your control improves, gradually increase the range. And only when the movement feels comfortable and controlled should you consider adding a light object, such as a small household item. The purpose isn't to lift something heavy. The purpose is to learn a better movement pattern. Think about how useful that could be when you're picking up a bag of laundry, reaching for something on a lower shelf, or collecting something you've dropped. You're turning a basic exercise into a skill you can use throughout your day. Move #3. Controlled rotation plus balance. Now we come to the third movement. And this one addresses something we often don't think about until it becomes difficult. Turning while staying in control. Your life doesn't happen while you're facing straight ahead. You turn to look behind you. You rotate to reach for something. You change direction while walking. You step around furniture. You shift your weight from one leg to the other. So we want to practice that ability in a controlled environment. Stand near a sturdy countertop, wall, or heavy chair that you can use for support. Keep both feet comfortably on the floor to begin. Now, gently shift your weight from one leg toward the other. Don't rush. Once that feels comfortable, add a small, controlled rotation through your upper body. Imagine you're turning to look towards something beside you. You don't need to force the twist. The movement should feel smooth and controlled. Keep your breathing relaxed, and keep your head and torso moving together naturally, rather than snapping your head around. Now let's introduce the balance component. You can begin simply by shifting your weight from one foot to the other. That's already asking your body to recognize where your center of gravity is. If that feels easy, and you have a safe environment, you can briefly allow more weight onto one leg while keeping the other foot available for support. But here's an important rule. Never sacrifice safety just to make a balance exercise harder. You do not need to stand on one leg with your hands in the air to benefit from balance practice. If you need the wall, use the wall. If you need the countertop, use the countertop. If you need both feet firmly on the floor, stay there. That's your starting point. For beginners, keep both feet planted and make the rotation smaller. As your confidence improves, gradually increase the controlled range or add gentle weight shifting. And only if appropriate, you can gradually reduce how much support you use. The goal isn't to wobble dramatically. The goal is to teach your body to shift, turn, and recover with control. Think about walking through your home. You turn around the corner. You step sideways around a chair. You reach across a counter. You turn to respond when someone calls your name. These are ordinary movements, but they require your body to coordinate strength, balance, and rotation. That's why this third movement earns its place in our 3-move mobility system. So now you have 3 simple patterns. Sit to stand for standing and lower body control. Hip hinge for bending and using your hips effectively. And controlled rotation with balance for turning, shifting, and navigating your environment. You don't need to perform them perfectly. You need to practice them consistently, within a range that feels appropriate for your body. Now, doing these 3 movements once is not what creates better mobility. The real difference comes from how you practice them and whether you keep coming back to them. So before you turn these exercises into a routine, here are 7 simple tips that can make them much more useful. Tip #1. Start smaller than you think. One of the biggest mistakes people make with mobility is trying to go too far, too soon. You don't need to force a deep squat. You don't need to bend farther than your body comfortably allows. And you definitely don't need to push through pain just because you think a stretch or exercise is supposed to feel difficult. Start with a comfortable range of motion. Your goal is to teach your body control, not to win a flexibility competition. Remember, consistency matters more than intensity. A few controlled repetitions performed regularly can be much more practical than an exhausting session you never want to repeat. Tip #2. Slow down. This may be the simplest tip in the entire video. Slow down when you move too quickly. It's easy to use momentum instead of control, and you may not even notice it. Think especially about the sit to stand. Standing up is only half of the movement. Pay attention to the way you lower yourself back toward the chair. Can you control that descent? Can you stay balanced? Can you breathe normally? That slower phase gives you an opportunity to practice control instead of simply letting gravity take over. The same idea applies to the hip hinge and rotation. Smooth, controlled, intentionnel. You don't need to rush through these movements to make them effective. Tip #3. Use support without feeling weak. If you need a chair, wall, or countertop for support, use it. Seriously, a support surface isn't a sign that you're failing. It's a safety tool, especially when you're practicing balance or learning a new movement pattern. Having something stable nearby can give you the confidence to focus on your technique. And here's the encouraging part. You don't have to perform these movements perfectly on day one. Maybe today you need both hands on the chair. Later, you might only need one hand. Eventually, you may feel comfortable doing the movement with less support. That's progress. Don't compare your starting point with someone else's finishing point. Tip #4. Build a simple routine. Now let's turn these movements into something practical. You could start with sit to stand, around 8 to 12 controlled repetitions. Hip hinge, around 8 to 12 repetitions. Controlled rotation and balance, around 5 to 8 comfortable repetitions per side, adjusted to your ability. And that's it. Start with one round. You don't need to repeat the entire routine 5 times. If one round feels comfortable and manageable, you can gradually build toward 2 rounds over time. The important word here is gradually. Your goal isn't to feel exhausted afterward. Your goal is to create a routine that fits into your life. Because mobility training should support your day, not take over your day. Tip #5. Don't chase pain. There's an important difference between effort and pain. You may feel your muscles working. You may notice mild fatigue. You might feel a gentle stretching sensation during certain movements. But sharp, severe, or unusual pain is different. Don't treat pain as proof that an exercise is working. If something hurts, stop and reassess. You may need a smaller range of motion, a different variation, more support, or individualized professional guidance. There's no prize for forcing your body through something that doesn't feel right. Good mobility training should challenge you appropriately while respecting your body's limits. Tip #6. Attach the routine to something you already do. This is one of the easiest ways to make the habit stick. Don't depend entirely on motivation. Instead, connect your mobility routine to something that's already part of your day. For example, you could do it after your morning coffee, or after getting dressed, maybe before your afternoon walk, or after you've been sitting for a long period of time. The idea is simple. Existing habit first, mobility routine second. Over time, those two things become connected. And rather than waiting until you're extremely stiff before doing your exercises, you have a small routine that helps you stay in motion regularly. Think of these 3 exercises as your minimum mobility routine. Even on a busy day, you know you have something simple you can return to. You don't need the perfect workout. You need something realistic enough to keep doing. Tip #7. Know when you need professional guidance. And finally, know when a general routine isn't enough. If you're dealing with significant or persistent pain, you've recently had surgery, you have major balance difficulties, or you have a condition that affects how you move, it's important to get individualized guidance from an appropriate healthcare professional or physical therapist. A general video can teach movement principles, but it cannot see your posture, medical history, movement limitations, or individual needs. So use these exercises as general education, not as personalized medical treatment. And if you're unsure about whether a movement is appropriate for you, getting professional advice is the smarter choice. Remember, mobility isn't about doing everything. It's about doing the right amount of movement for your current ability, then gradually building from there. 3 movements, a few minutes, a comfortable pace, and a routine simple enough that you can actually keep coming back to it. So let's bring everything together. Today, we focused on just 3 movement patterns. First, the sit to stand, a simple way to practice the strength and control you use every time you get up from a chair, rise from the toilet, or stand up after sitting. Second, the hip hinge, teaching your body to move from the hips with control when you're bending, reaching, or picking something up. And third, controlled rotation with balance, helping you practice the ability to shift your weight, turn, and move through your environment with greater awareness and control. Notice something about all 3? None of them are complicated. And that's the point. You don't necessarily need a huge mobility routine with dozens of exercises. You need movements that make sense for your life and a routine you can realistically repeat. Because mobility isn't something you build in one afternoon. It's something you continue practicing. A few minutes today, a few minutes tomorrow, then another day. Over time, those small moments of purposeful movement can become part of your normal routine. And here's the bigger picture. We often don't think about mobility while it's working well. We simply get out of bed. We stand from a chair. We walk across the room. We bend down. We turn around. We climb the stairs. But those everyday abilities are worth protecting. You don't need to fear getting older. Instead, you can prepare for it by continuing to give your body opportunities to move, strengthen, balance, and adapt. Your future mobility is worth practicing for today. And remember, these 3 movements aren't a guarantee against every mobility problem. They're simply practical tools you can use as part of an overall active lifestyle. So now I want to hear from you. Which of these 3 movements feels easiest for you? Number 1, number 2, or number 3? Tell me in the comments. And if this routine is something you want to come back to, save this video so you can easily find it again. If you found this helpful, subscribe for more practical videos focused on mobility, strength, balance, and healthy aging without unnecessarily complicated routines. You don't have to do everything at once. Start where you are. Move with control. Stay consistent. And keep giving your body reasons to move. Stay consistent, stay patient, and keep giving your body reasons to move.